Hiya peeps and Disney freaks, welcome to yet another episode of Disney's Unraveled, where we'll dive into the Disney movies and talk about the stories that inspired them. If you're new to the channel, hi and welcome. My name is Amber. I'm a Disney geek making Disney related content. If you like what I did here, don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell to get notified whenever I upload. It's been a long time, you guys. Today we're gonna strive away from the Disney princesses and talk about Disney's Pinocchio. At the beginning of the movie we meet Jiminy Cricket. He's going to tell us the story of Pinocchio. We see Jiminy enter the workplace of a toy maker called Geppetto. He's laying his final touch to a marionette, which he calls Pinocchio. That evening Geppetto is visited by the Blue Fairy. As a reward for making so many children happy, she makes Pinocchio alive. She appoints Jiminy as his new conscience. Jiminy tells and sings Pinocchio that he only needs to whistle and he'd be there. Pinocchio falls off the workbench and wakes up Geppetto. The latter is thrilled to have a real son. The next morning, Geppetto sends Pinocchio off to school, where he meets not so honest John and his friend Gideon the cat. They persuade him to go with them to Stromboli, who will make a star out of him, which I understand because they sing a catchy song after all.
Hey, diddle-dee-day, toneel is iets voor mij.
Jiminy, late because he overslept, finds Pinocchio and tries to stop him to no avail. That evening, Pinocchio has his first performance with Stromboli. Jiminy watches, being very annoyed, but after seeing the kind of success Pinocchio has, decides to leave him with Stromboli. When Pinocchio wants to go back to his father, Stromboli locks him up, says he will make a lot of money with him, and says he will make firewood of the boy when he becomes too old. To wish him success, Jiminy comes back and finds Pinocchio locked up. We see Geppetto looking for his son, but just misses the cart in which Pinocchio and Jiminy are passing by. The Blue Fairy shows up once again. Pinocchio tells all sort of lies how he got into this situation. While doing this, his nose grows longer. In the end, he promises her not to do it again, and the Blue Fairy frees him. We cut to a scene with Honest John, Gideon and the coachman. The coachman asks them to bring him stupid little boys, the kind that don't listen and don't go to school. And then he brings them to Pleasure Island. He says it can go wrong because they won't come back as boys. The reaction of John and Gideon is all of us watching the film. Jiminy and Pinocchio are ready to go home when John and Gideon want to lure Pinocchio in. Pinocchio needs to get his head screwed on again because he trusts them again, and they bring him to the coachman off to Pleasure Island. On the island, Pinocchio becomes friends with Lampwick. The island is being trashed by the boys. They smoke and drink and do everything little boys should not do. When Lampwick and Pinocchio are playing pool, Lampwick changes into a donkey. Pinocchio only gets a tail and donkey ears. And even though the scene is freaking terrifying, I say, serves you right. Jiminy rescues Pinocchio and together they flee Pleasure Island. After swimming a long way, they come back home. Geppetto isn't there. He is looking for Pinocchio. A letter is dropped off by a dove, which is a bit convenient, that says that while looking for Pinocchio, Geppetto got eaten by a whale named Monstro. And so Pinocchio makes himself heavier with a stone tied to his tail and goes looking for Monstro underwater. Pinocchio finds him inside the whale, and together with Geppetto they make the whale sneeze so that they can escape. Monstro is pretty angry, I mean, who could blame him? Sneezing is horrible, and goes after them. Pinocchio saves Geppetto but dies himself. The Blue Fairy thinks he did such a great job being a good boy that she saves him and makes a real boy out of him, and they live happily ever after. So, I don't know if people are familiar with the original book nowadays, but it's sometimes even more messed up than the Disney movie, which, says a lot. So let's dive into it. La Avventure di Pinocchio, The Adventures of Pinocchio, was written by Carlo Collodi and was published as a children's novel in Italy in 1883. The story first appeared in batches in the Italian children's magazine Giornale per Bambini. It has been translated in more than 300 languages, has been the most translated Italian book, and after the Bible, the most widely read. Our story begins in Tuscany, Italy. A carpenter named Master Antonio, but is widely known as Master Cherry, has found a block of wood which he plans to carve out a leg for his table. But after the block begins to shout, a frightened Master Cherry gives the block of wood to his neighbor Geppetto, a poor man who wants to make a living of being a puppeteer. Geppetto carves this block of wood into a boy and names him Pinocchio. Before Pinocchio is even fully realized, his mischievous attitude is already present. When Geppetto carved feet for the boy, he kicks the poor man, and after Geppetto learns him how to walk, he immediately runs away from home and into the town. He is caught by a policeman who thinks that Pinocchio is mistreated by Geppetto, and he throws Geppetto in jail. Now alone, Pinocchio goes back to Geppetto's house, where a cricket who lived in this house for more than 100 years warns Pinocchio about being disobedient. In a reaction, Pinocchio grabs a hammer, throws it at the cricket, killing him. The next day, Geppetto is freed from prison and he carves new feet for Pinocchio because he fell asleep on the stove, and in gratitude, Pinocchio promises to attend school. And Geppetto sells his only coat to buy a book for the boy. On his way to school the next day, Pinocchio spots a marionette theater and he sells his book for a ticket. The other puppets recognize Pinocchio and they disturb the show. Angered, the puppeteer master Mangiafuoco decides to use Pinocchio as firewood for his dinner. Pinocchio pleads with the master and is released. And when the puppeteer master learns about Pinocchio's poor father Geppetto, he gives him 5 gold coins to give to his father. As Pinocchio travels home, he meets a fox and a cat. The cat pretends to be blind and the fox pretends to be lame, and a bird tries to warn Pinocchio about the fox and the cat, but the cat eats the bird. And the animals convince Pinocchio to plant his golden coins in the field of miracles next to the city of Catchfools. They will grow into a tree of golden coins. They stop at an inn, but they leave Pinocchio to pay for everything and let the innkeeper tell Pinocchio that they had to leave because the cat's kittens fell ill, and they will meet Pinocchio by the field of miracles. When Pinocchio sets off to the city of Catfools, the ghost of the talking cricket wants to take the coins back to his father, but again Pinocchio ignores the cricket. When passing through a forest, Pinocchio is ambushed by bandits who are the fox and the cat in disguise, robbing him. Pinocchio bites off the cat's paw and hides the coins in his mouth while escaping into a white house. There, Pinocchio is greeted by a fairy with turquoise hair. Unfortunately for Pinocchio, the fox and the cat catch up with him and they hang him in a tree. And while waiting for Pinocchio to finally suffocate, they get bored and they leave. The fairy Pinocchio met saves him with the help of a falcon and a poodle, and 3 doctors come in to determine if Pinocchio is still alive. And one of them is the ghost of the talking cricket, who simply says that he is alive but was disobedient and he hurt his father. When recovered, Pinocchio lies to the fairy what happened to the golden coins, and his nose grows so long that woodpeckers have to cut his nose, and the fairy sends for Geppetto to come and live with them. Ready to meet his father, Pinocchio encounters the fox and the cat again, and after Pinocchio sees the cat's missing paw, they make up a story about feeding it to an old poor wolf. They remind Pinocchio about Catchfools, and once again he believes them and he follows them there. And when reaching the field of miracles, Pinocchio digs a hole and he buries the coins in there and leaves for 20 minutes to give the tree a chance to grow. But as soon as he does so, the cat and the fox dig up the coins and leave. Pinocchio reports the theft of his coins but is sentenced to jail due to foolish behavior, but he's soon released because of a celebration and he leaves Catchfools.
Pinocchio finally comes back to the cottage of the fairy, but he only finds a gravestone, and while mourning her dead, a pigeon offers to give him a ride to the seaside, where Geppetto is building a boat to go find Pinocchio, but Geppetto is then swallowed by a terrible dogfish. Pinocchio gets a ride from a dolphin to the island of Buzzy Bees, where you can only get food in order for some labor. And it is there where he encounters a lady who he recognizes as the fairy, now old enough to be his mother, and she promises to take care of him if Pinocchio will behave and go to school for a whole year. Then she will turn him into a real boy. Pinocchio does excellent in life and in school, and the fairy promised him to turn him into a real boy the next day, but then he meets a boy named Candlewick who will go to a place called Toyland where everyone plays and never works. Pinocchio goes with him and they have fun for the next 5 months until one morning when they all turned into donkeys. A dormouse tells him about donkey fever. Boys who always play and don't work turn into donkeys. Eventually, Pinocchio is sold to a man who wants to skin him and make a drum out of him, and he holds Pinocchio into the sea to drown him, but when he takes Pinocchio back out of the sea, he is now holding a puppet. Pinocchio tells him that the fish ate all of his donkey skin off. Pinocchio dives back into the sea and finds the dogfish and is swallowed by the fish, and there he finds Geppetto, who has been living inside the fish on a boat, and with the help of Tuna they escape. Pinocchio and Geppetto encounter the fox and the cat again, who are now very poor. The cat is actually blind and the fox is actually lame, hairless, and he sold his tail for food. They ask him for money, but Pinocchio says it serves them right for all the wickedness they caused. Pinocchio and Geppetto find a little house being inhabited by the talking cricket, who says he got this house from a goat with turquoise hair, and they can stay. Pinocchio gets a job working on a farm, and there he recognizes the old dying donkey as his friend Candlewick. After a couple of months, Pinocchio goes into town to buy a new suit for 40 pennies that he saved. But he discovers that the fairy is ill and that she needs money. And immediately he gives all that he owns to a snail who works for the fairy. The night in a dream, he is visited by the fairy who kisses him, and when he wakes up, he is a real boy at last. The fairy also sends him a new suit, boots, and 40 golden coins. Geppetto soon turns to health again, and they live happily ever after. As you just heard in the story by Carlo Collodi, Pinocchio isn't very likable to begin with, and Walt didn't like that, so he changed the character of Pinocchio. They started off with a drawing of Pinocchio that looked very puppet-like, very stiff, and Walt wasn't feeling it at all, and it got so bad that he stopped production for a bit. And Milt Kahl, he came up with the actual design of Pinocchio when he was doing test runs of drawing Pinocchio underwater when knocking on the clam asking where Monstro was, and Walt liked it, and that's how Pinocchio got his design. Around this time, Walt also figured that the talking cricket in the book could be so much more than it was. And he thought there was not enough love in the book, and therefore he created Jiminy Cricket. And the humor in Pinocchio is mostly to thank to Jiminy, who cracks a joke to make a tense situation funny again. The movie is essentially about temptation. Do we do the right thing? Disney made the movie lighter and more for an American audience. However, it still has the very dark undertones of many fairy tales, that something could go very wrong when you don't behave or you don't listen or listen to your conscience. I've talked about the 9 Old Men before. They were like the main animators where the studio floated on for many years. However, in the making of Pinocchio, they were all still very young, and main animators where the 9 Old Men looked up to here were Norm Ferguson and Fred Moore, who created the whole Disney aesthetic in the 1930s. Other stars were Bill Heitler and Art Babbitt, where the 9 old men also looked up to. Bill Heitler was, in the opinion of many people, the best animator who ever lived, and he was a star in drawing very powerful, strong, forceful characters, and he is most known for drawing Cernobog in Night on Bald Mountain in Fantasia, but for this movie it is no wonder that he created Stromboli. Art Babbitt was the animator of Geppetto, and he thought that this was personally his best work ever. Fred Moore did Lampwick, and he actually based the design a little bit on himself. Like I said, this is the film where the 9 old men started on. Like Mill Call thought of the design for Pinocchio, and Frank Thomas animated Pinocchio as a marionette before he becomes alive, and Ollie Johnston animated Pinocchio's nose growing. Ward Kimball became the head supervisor for Jiminy Cricket, and Walt promised him this after his soup scene of the dwarfs was cut in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And Walt wanted Jiminy to look cute and not so much as an insect, so that is what Walt designed. Eric Larson animated Figaro and gave him the personality of a spoiled little kid. Norm Ferguson supervised the unit that did Honest John. Cliff Edwards, who did the voice of Jiminy Cricket, was the first big star to voice a character in an animated film. Mostly in the beginning, a lot of guys from the studio would voice the characters. Even Walt himself did Mickey Mouse. Dickie Jones wasn't the first choice for Pinocchio, but when the design of the character changed, Dickie's voice seemed to go along very well with the new Pinocchio.
Every time I think about it, I think how blessed I was that I was there at the right time, right moment, and I was the one that Walt Disney decided to use. And the people that I got to work with, it's unbelievable. I worked with some of the best character actors in the business at that time. I'm so proud that I was able to work with one of the greatest groups that was ever assembled for an animated feature.
Christian Robb was the voice of Geppetto, and he was the live action model for Geppetto as well, and looks exactly like the character does. Mel Blanc, also known as the voice of Bugs Bunny and as the man of 1,000 voices, never voiced anything for Disney, but he was to voice Gideon the cat until Walt decided that Gideon should be a mute character, even though they already recorded all of the lines with Mel. Walt wanted perfection. Albert Herder was the person who made the rich little details in the film, giving it a luxury look. The multiplane camera was used. It was a device that the Disney studio invented.
The multiplane camera was a device that the Disney studio invented that gave depth to the animation scene. With this camera, they can do elaborate background paintings and go through the scene. And they did that frequently in this film.
And they had big frames holding these glass panes that were painted for this, only they were gigantic things, and the camera would move forward through those.
Pinocchio was the first animated feature to receive 2 Academy Awards for music, both for the score and the best song, When You Wish Upon a Star. The second time this happened for the Disney Studios was on Mary Poppins. Lee Harline came to Disney in the early 1930s, and he composed some of the hardest silly symphonies, such as the band concert with Mickey Mouse. And he was also a composer on Snow White. He used a range of different styles in Pinocchio, such as charming music for the music boxes and a jazzy bluesy style for Pleasure Island, and a different type of music from all over the world, and I've Got No Strings. Paul Smith also worked on the score, and Ned Washington was the lyricist, and he won also the Academy Award for When You Wish Upon a Star, and he won another Academy Award in the 1950s, just not for the Disney Studios. When the film came out, critics were falling over themselves, trying to explain that this movie was even better than Snow White. Still, the film wasn't as successful at the box office, and the reason for that was that the European market was cut off because of World War II. It costs twice as much as Snow White, but didn't have the same success. But now we can look back and can see the major achievement on this film. That was it for today's episode, guys. I hope you liked it once again, and I hope to see you soon on a next Disney Unraveled. Have a nice day. Bye bye.